When an 83-year-old Army veteran slowly unbuttoned his jacket in the courtroom, nobody expected what would happen next. What he'd been carrying on his chest for the past 41 years made Judge Frank Caprio do something no judge in American history has ever done before. This isn't just a story about a traffic violation. This is a story about honor, memory, and sacrifice that will change your understanding of heroism. Before we show you what happened next, hit that subscribe button for Order in Court stories. If you love Judge Frank Caprio and believe in justice with a human face, support our channel. We're just starting this journey, and your support means everything. Drop a like if you believe true heroes deserve respect, and comment below with your city. We share stories like this every day, because sometimes justice looks nothing like we expect. Now let's get back to what happened in that courtroom. Tuesday, 11:20 a.m., Providence Municipal Court. The morning docket was proceeding as usual. Standard traffic violations, minor fines, typical routine. The court clerk shuffled through paperwork, the gallery filled with quiet whispers of people waiting their turn. Fluorescent lights softly illuminated the wooden benches, and through the windows, a gray October day was visible. Judge Frank Caprio was reviewing the next case on the docket when the courtroom door slowly opened. An elderly man walked in, tall despite his age. Back straight, shoulders squared, gray hair neatly combed back. He wore a navy blue suit that had clearly seen better days, worn at the elbows, but impeccably clean and pressed. White shirt buttoned to the top, a narrow dark red tie. Black shoes polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the overhead lights. On his lapel, a small pin with an eagle and stars. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane made of dark wood with a brass handle. Each step seemed measured, deliberate. The gallery grew quieter. Several people instinctively straightened up, watching him. Judge Caprio looked up from his documents. Their eyes met for a moment, and the judge felt something unusual. This man possessed a dignity that couldn't be bought or faked. It emanated from every movement, from the way he held his head, how he looked straight ahead. The court clerk announced, "Case number 47821. Retired Lieutenant Colonel William James Collins, charged with running a red light." The man approached the podium, set his cane against the edge of the table, straightened even more, folded his hands behind his back. Judge Caprio stood from behind his bench, a sign of respect he rarely demonstrated. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel Collins." "Yes, Your Honor." Deep voice, firm, with a slight rasp. "Please, have a seat, sir." "Thank you, but I prefer to stand, Your Honor." The judge slowly nodded and remained standing as well. "According to the report, on September 8th at 2:35 p.m., you ran a red light at the intersection of Main Street and 3rd Avenue. A police officer documented the violation. The fine is $85. Do you plead guilty?" Collins paused, looked directly into the judge's eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. I ran the red light. It's my fault, and I accept full responsibility." His words rang clear, without excuses. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly. "Lieutenant Colonel, most people here try to explain why they're not guilty. You're the first one this morning who simply told the truth. May I ask what happened that day?" Collins lowered his gaze. The fingers of his right hand clenched into a fist, then released. He took a deep breath. "I was driving to the cemetery, Your Honor. Rhode Island Veterans National Cemetery. He stopped, choosing his words. "I go there every year on this date, September 8th, for 41 years straight." The room grew even quieter. People stopped whispering. Even the court clerk looked up from her computer. Judge Caprio set his pen down on the desk. "September 8th. That's a special date?" "Yes, Your Honor." Colin's voice became quieter, but not weaker. September 8th, 1984. Operation Peaceful Partner, Lebanon. Frank Caprio slowly sat down. He gestured for the veteran to sit as well, but the man shook his head. I commanded Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division. We were part of the multinational forces in Beirut. Our mission was... He stopped, swallowed. Our mission was to provide security for civilians during evacuation. The judge listened silently. That morning, our convoy was ambushed in the Shuf region. We lost 17 men in the first 5 minutes, 8 more while we were retreating under fire. One of my soldiers, Corporal David Torres, was covering the evacuation of wounded. He was 22 years old. He saved 6 men before. Colin stopped, his jaw clenched, before a grenade fragment hit his neck. No one in the gallery breathed. I held him in my arms for the last 3 minutes of his life. He asked me, "Sir, are the others safe?" I said, "Yes, son, everyone's safe." He smiled and closed his eyes. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly. Tears glistened in his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel, I lost 25 men that day, Your Honor. 25 sons, brothers, fathers. The youngest was 19. The oldest was 34. I was their commander. They trusted me with their lives. And I..." Colin's voice trembled for the first time. "I brought them home in coffins." Judge Frank Caprio stood from behind his bench, slowly walked around and approached the podium. He now stood not as a judge, but as one human being facing another. "Lieutenant Colonel Collins, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Your Honor." Collins straightened again. "I'm here to pay the fine. I broke the law. I was distracted thinking about that day, and I missed the red light. That's not an excuse." "You go there every year?" "Every year, Your Honor. Without exception. 41 years. I place flowers on every grave. 25 graves. I read their names aloud. Tell them how the year went. What's happening in the world. Sometimes I bring letters from their families, if relatives ask me to read something by the grave." A woman in the gallery quietly sobbed. A man next to her wiped his eyes. The judge looked at the documents. "It says here you pulled over immediately when you heard the siren. The officer noted you were exceptionally courteous and admitted the violation right away." "Yes, sir. Officer Rodriguez was professional. I didn't argue." "Lieutenant Colonel, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Your Honor." "How do you live with this? With the memory of that day?" Collins slowly raised his hand to the top button of his jacket. "May I show you something, Your Honor?" The judge nodded. The old man unbuttoned his jacket, removed it, and carefully hung it on the back of the chair, then slowly began unbuttoning his white shirt. Everyone in the courtroom froze. 1 button, 2nd, 3rd. Collins opened his shirt, and what the people in the courtroom saw made them hold their breath. On the veteran's chest, directly over his heart, was a tattoo. Not an ordinary tattoo. Not an eagle, not a flag, not military insignia. Names. 25 names, inked in black letters directly on his skin. Each name carefully rendered, line after line, covering the entire left side of his chest, descending to his ribs. Corporal David Torres, Private Michael Johnson, Sergeant Robert Henderson, Corporal James Wilson, Private Christopher Brown, and so on. 25 names, 25 lives. Next to each name, a small date, 09/08, 1984. Judge Caprio froze. His hand slowly rose to his mouth. In the gallery, several people stood, unable to contain themselves. A woman was openly crying. A man in a Marine Corps uniform in the back row stood at attention, tears streaming down his cheeks. Collins spoke quietly, but every word was audible in the absolute silence of the hall. I got this tattoo a week after the funerals. They told me it was dangerous. To do such extensive work at my age, I was 42 then. But I insisted. He ran his hand over the names. They're always with me. Every morning when I get dressed, I see them. Every evening when I go to bed, they're the last thing I see. They're here, right over my heart. His voice trembled. This is the only way I can live with it, Your Honor. I carry them with me, always. They will never be forgotten as long as I'm alive. Judge Caprio stood motionless. Tears flowed down his face. He didn't even try to hide them. And then something happened that had never occurred in this courtroom in all its years of operation. Judge Frank Caprio, 78-year-old judge with 50 years of experience, slowly raised his hand and gave a military salute. His hand froze at his temple, fingers together, back straight. "Lieutenant Colonel Collins," he said, voice trembling, "on behalf of this court, on behalf of this city, on behalf of every American who sleeps peacefully tonight because of people like you and your soldiers, I salute you, sir." Collins froze, then slowly straightened and returned the salute. Two men stood facing each other, a judge and a soldier, separated by a podium but united in a moment of profound respect. The silence lasted an eternity. Then one person in the gallery stood, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire courtroom was standing. The court clerk, the bailiff, the police officer at the door. Everyone was standing. And they were all saluting. Some raised a hand to their heart. The Marine in the back row saluted regulation style. An elderly woman simply stood with her hand pressed to her chest, tears flowing down her wrinkled cheeks. Collins slowly lowered his hand, buttoned his shirt, put on his jacket. His hands trembled slightly. Judge Caprio returned to his bench, wiped his eyes with a handkerchief, took a deep breath. "Lieutenant Colonel Collins, I want you to understand something." "Yes, Your Honor." "This court exists to administer justice. But justice isn't just the application of law. Justice is understanding context, understanding the person who stands before us." He paused. "You broke the law. You ran a red light. But you did so while driving to a place where 25 heroes lie beneath the ground. You do this every year for 41 years to honor the memory of men who gave their lives for this country." The judge looked at the documents and then closed the folder. "The fine for running a red light is $85. I'm dismissing this fine completely." He looked up. "Moreover, I want the city of Providence to officially express gratitude to you and to the memory of your soldiers." Collins started to speak. "Your Honor, that's not necessary. I don't—" "Lieutenant Colonel, let me finish." The old man fell silent. "I will arrange for the mayor's office to contact you within a week. We will organize an official ceremony in your honor and in honor of Alpha Company soldiers." The judge stood again. "This country too often forgets its heroes. We remember the wars, but forget the faces, forget the names. You've been carrying those names over your heart for 41 years. It's time for this city to remember them too." Collins stood motionless. His lips trembled. I don't know what to say, Your Honor." "You don't need to say anything, sir." Frank Caprio walked around the bench and extended his hand. "Thank you for your service. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for coming into this courtroom today. You reminded all of us what truly matters." Collins shook his hand, firmly, for a long time. "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge didn't release his hand. "One last thing, Lieutenant Colonel." "Yes, sir." Next time you drive to the cemetery, the judge smiled through tears. Please stop at red lights. Those 25 men wouldn't want you to get into an accident on your way to them. Collins smiled for the first time, weakly but sincerely. I promise, Your Honor. He took his cane, turned, and slowly walked toward the exit. The gallery was still standing. When he reached the door, the Marine from the back row stepped into the aisle, stood at attention, and saluted. Collins stopped, straightened, and returned the salute. Then the young Marine said, voice trembling, "Sir, my grandfather served in the 8th Infantry Regiment. He always talked about Lieutenant Colonel Collins. Said you were the best commander he ever knew. The young man swallowed. He died 2 years ago, but before he passed, he asked me to thank you if I ever met you." Collins froze. His eyes widened. "What was your grandfather's name, son?" "Sergeant Thomas Riley, sir." Tears flowed down the old man's face. "Tommy Riley. My God. Tommy." He grabbed the young man's shoulder. "He was a good man, one of the best. He saved 3 lives that day. 3 lives." "I know, sir. He told us." Collins hugged the young Marine, tightly, for a long time. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to Order in Court Stories. We're just beginning to share these incredible stories about justice, humanity, and heroism. If you love Judge Caprio and believe that true heroes deserve recognition, your support means everything to us. Comment below if you know veterans who inspire you. Let's remember together. But Lieutenant Colonel Collins' story doesn't end here. 3 weeks later, on September 29th, a ceremony took place at Providence City Hall. The large hall was packed. Veterans in dress uniforms, families of fallen soldiers, representatives of military organizations, journalists, regular citizens. More than 300 people came to honor the memory of Alpha Company. Judge Frank Caprio was invited as a guest of honor. He sat in the front row next to the city mayor. Lieutenant Colonel William Collins stood on stage in full dress uniform. Medals and ribbons gleamed on his chest. Back straight, head held high. The mayor read the official city proclamation. The city of Providence expresses its deepest gratitude and appreciation to Lieutenant Colonel William James Collins for 30 years of service in the United States Army, and for his unwavering dedication to honoring the memory of Alpha Company soldiers who fell on September 8, 1984, in Lebanon. Then the mayor announced, "Beginning today, the small park near the Rhode Island Veterans National Cemetery will be renamed Alpha Company Memorial Park. In this park, a monument will be erected bearing the names of all 25 soldiers who fell that day." Collins closed his eyes. Tears flowed down his face. The mayor continued, "Furthermore, every year on September 8th, the city of Providence will hold a memorial ceremony in this park. Lieutenant Colonel Collins, you will no longer honor your soldier's memory alone. We will do it together with you." The hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapped, cried. Judge Caprio rose and saluted again. Families of 18 of the 25 fallen soldiers attended the ceremony. Mothers, wives, sisters, children, many of whom were infants or not yet born when their fathers died. Each family approached Collins, hugged him, thanked him for remembering. One woman, the daughter of Corporal David Torres, said, "I was 3 when my father died. I barely remember him, but I know you remember. You remember every year. That means everything to our family." Collins held her hands. "Your father was a hero. He saved 6 lives. I will never forget him." By the end of the ceremony, Collins was surrounded by soldiers' families. They stood together, embracing, a single entity bound by memory and sacrifice. 6 months later, in March of the following year, the monument was unveiled. A granite wall 8 feet high with 25 names engraved. Above the names, a relief sculpture of a soldier with bowed head. Below the names, these words: Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry Regiment, killed in action, September 8, 1984. Lebanon never forgotten, always in our hearts. On the day of the unveiling, it was raining. But that didn't stop people. Hundreds came. Veterans stood in the rain in dress uniforms. Families of the fallen held flags and flowers. Lieutenant Colonel Collins stood before the monument. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with tears. Judge Caprio stood beside him. "Lieutenant Colonel, they will remember now." "Yes, Your Honor." Collins looked at the names. "Now they will remember." He ran his hand over the granite, touching each name, whispering something. A prayer, perhaps, or simply words he'd spoken to them every year. Then he unbuttoned his jacket and shirt. In the rain, before everyone gathered, he opened his chest with a tattoo, placed his hand on his heart, on the names on his skin, then placed that same hand on the granite monument. Names on his body, names on stone, an eternal connection, eternal memory. People around him were openly crying. Judge Caprio placed his hand on the veteran's shoulder. "You're a good man, William, and a good commander. They know that. Wherever they are, they know." Collins nodded, unable to speak. The ceremony concluded with a minute of silence. 300 people stood in the rain, silent, honoring the memory of 25 heroes who gave their lives 41 years ago. From that day forward, every year on September 8th, people gather at Alpha Company Memorial Park. Veterans, families, regular citizens. They read the names aloud, place flowers, share stories. Lieutenant Colonel Collins no longer goes there alone. A year after the ceremony, a journalist interviewed Judge Caprio. "Judge, in your 50 years on the bench, you've seen thousands of cases. Why did Lieutenant Colonel Collins' story affect you so deeply?" Frank Caprio thought for a long time before answering. "Because," he finally said, "it reminded me why I do this work. The law exists for people, not people for the law. Yes, he broke a rule, ran a red light. But rules are created to protect life. And this man dedicated his entire life to honoring the memory of those who gave their lives for us." He paused. Sometimes justice isn't punishment. Sometimes justice is recognition. Recognition of sacrifice. Recognition of pain. Recognition of love that doesn't fade, even after 41 years. "You saluted him in the courtroom. Was that a first?" "Yes. And I would do it again, without hesitation." Caprio smiled. "You know what struck me most? Not that he carries their names on his chest, but that he goes there every year. 41 years, never missed once. Rain, snow, illness, he's always there. That's not just memory, that's love. That's devotion at a level most of us can't even comprehend." The judge looked into the camera. "We live in a world where people forget about anything after a week. But there are people like Lieutenant Colonel Collins who remember every day of their lives, who carry that burden with dignity, who transform pain into memory, memory into legacy, legacy into love. That's true heroism." Lieutenant Colonel William Collins is 84 years old today. He still lives in Providence. He still comes to Alpha Company Memorial Park every September 8th. But now he's not alone. Dozens of people come with him. Veterans he's never met. Families who want to show their children what it means to remember. Students from local schools studying the history of Operation Peaceful Partner. Last year, when Collins arrived at the monument, 200 people were waiting for him. They stood quietly while he read the names. And when he finished, They all read the names together. 200 voices, 25 names, an echo that carried across the entire cemetery. Collins stood and listened. Tears flowed down his face. But this time, they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude, because his soldiers were no longer forgotten. Their names were spoken. Their stories were told. Their sacrifice was remembered. And that was all he could ask for. Lieutenant Colonel Collins' story is a reminder to all of us. Justice isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's compassion. Sometimes it's recognition. Sometimes it's simply seeing the person standing before you and understanding their pain, their devotion, their love. Judge Frank Caprio could have just collected the fine. Could have said, "The law is the law." But he didn't. He saw a veteran carrying 25 names on his heart. And he did the only right thing. He saluted. That salute changed one man's life, but it reminded an entire city of what truly matters: memory, honor, sacrifice, and love that outlives even death. If you believe stories like this should be told, support Order in Court Stories. We're just starting, and every subscription, every like, helps us continue sharing these incredible moments of justice and humanity. If you love Judge Caprio and his approach to justice, join our community. Comment below. How do you honor heroes? We read every comment. And remember, sometimes the most just decision is simply to acknowledge someone's pain and say, "Thank you. We remember." This story is a dramatization for storytelling and educational purposes. Events are inspired by real examples of veterans' dedication and compassionate justice, but characters and specific details are fictionalized, not legal advice.